OK，各位来宾，大家好，非常感谢大家的出席，我们非常激动向大家介绍我们编辑的新书，同时我们也非常荣幸的邀请到李全教授来参加今天的新书发布，相信他的演讲会为我们带来更多的启发和思考。希望这次活动和这本书能启发更多的未来的合作和交流。谢谢大家的参与和支持。Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for joining us for our special book launch today. It's wonderful to see you all. A couple of thank yous before we begin. Thank you to you, the audience, for attending. And I know some of you have also been attending our seminar series in the past. So thank you so much for your kind support. Thank you to my co-editors who are joined here today. So Dr. Danping Wang and Dr. Zhang. It has been a wonderful experience to work with you both. I think we make a great team. And so thank you for all your support and all the work over these past couple of years that I've enjoyed working with you. Thank you also to the series editors who have published this book, and also to all at Palgrave Macmillan, the editing team who are working hard. Last but not least, a thank you to all of our authors of the chapters. It's great to see you all here, although we're not in person, we're here virtually. So thank you so much for that. A quick outline of today's today's book launch. First, we're going to welcome our guest speaker, Professor Li Chuan, who is currently in New Zealand. And I believe that the team in New Zealand, so that includes Dr. Danping Wang, Dr. Linda Lay, and Professor Li Chuan, they've had a long day. So thank you for hanging on. And we look forward to hearing from you soon. I'll then provide an introduction to this edited volume before welcoming our chapter authors and wrapping up with a Q&A if there are any questions. So throughout this book launch, if you have any questions, the chat is disabled, but please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A text box. Dr. Zhang will monitor that and let me know if there are any questions towards the end so we can get through them. So without further ado, I'll pass to Dr. Danping Wang in the University of Auckland, and she will introduce our guest speaker.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Osborne, for your introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us at this lovely evening. We are very, very privileged to have Professor Li Chuan joining us from Beijing to Auckland. And he arrived yesterday, and we talk about the birth of the book and our collaboration. And also we mentioned about the progress we have made in all of these universities across the world about making a big progress in, renovating, transforming Chinese character teaching. And especially we have an amazing team here online. So I'll just have a very brief introduction of Professor Li Chuan, and I believe such a big name doesn't really need an introduction. So Professor Li Chuan, working at the Renmin University in China, and he's been teaching Chinese as a second language for 37 years, 37年了. So he's very, very experienced. And just now he was in my office and we were talking about how to introduce him. And he said he was born and established in the era that everyone's focusing on handwriting. But he is actually one of the first few, scholars, established scholars, influential scholars in China supporting e-writing, typing, and hoping to see a real change in Chinese language teaching, not only in China, but other places in the world. So I think without further delay, I would just have Professor Li Chuan here. 李老师, welcome. 谢谢.
谢谢各位老师，谢谢丹平。我先告诉大家，我心情很激动， 按照中国的说法，新书发布就是开张，开张大吉。我参加这样一个开张大吉的事儿，心情非常激动。给我这样一个荣幸的机会，让我在这个新书发布上讲几句话。你们想象我会很激动的，的确激动。我想另外说明的是，我不会英文。刚才这个线上这位美丽优雅的老师，我知道他在叫我的名字，可是请你原谅，我不认识你的名字。不光是你，其他这个凡是用英文写的我都记不住。不过我记住了您的面孔和你刚才讲的话。那话呢我听不懂，可是我在想象，我用最美好的想象来想象您在说什么。包括今天晚上各位同行发言，我也用我想象你们在说什么，这是没办法的事儿。可是各位同行，我们在一起讨论汉字教学、汉语教学的问题，这对我一个土生土长的中国人，也是教这行的人就已经足够了。那我想第一个是祝贺这本新书发布。这个基于线上教学，这3位编者和作者出版了这部新书，我表示由衷的祝贺和高兴。汉字教学是影响汉语教学的第一个或者说根本性的关键问题。汉字学习影响学习者的信心、效果和这个能力的提升。所以汉字教学的研究，或者说汉字教学的突破，应该说就是汉语教学的突破。那我想呢，这本新书是基于疫情下研究汉字教学，那么借用了线上教学，或者说推动了汉字的数字化教学、信息化教学。这个疫情给我们带来了一个汉字教学革新性的机会，让我们把汉字教学从传统的书写教学引入了电写时代，这是一个重大的突破。这里头有许多问题值得研究。我觉得第一个突破不仅仅是书写方式的突破，汉字教学和学习理念，也是一个重大突破。汉字研究的新课题带来了很多，所以我祝贺这本书。我同时感到高兴的是，我有机会认识美国的几位同行，他们大概编了一本书，大概在今年8月份出版，叫《电写时代：汉字教学理论与实践》。我有非常荣幸，受他们的邀请，为他们的新书写一个序。我不知道他们是怎么想的，一个不会英文的人，见识很短的人，但是他们想象，尽管如此，我不是一个保守的人，我对这个汉字教学数字化或者叫电写时代是热烈欢迎，坚决支持。我想我能代表很多人当然不包括那些守着传统不放的，对电写有抵触情绪的人。我想慢慢他们也会改变。从我们整个国际中文教育来讲，至少我现在知道，美国的同行出了一本书。现在呢，我们新西兰，也包括美国同行，澳洲的，爱尔兰的同行又出了一本书，这绝不是偶然。我相信这些研究成果的推动基于理论和实践的研究，必定会给国际中文教育界汉字教学带来新的起色，或者说革新性的变化。我做这一行的老同志，感到非常激动，非常兴奋，因为汉字教学可以说是汉语教学的成者，也可以说是败者。成者是我们汉字有理据、有历史、有美丽的这个结构形式，败者是它也确实有难处。实事求是的说，认写汉字都不是件容易的事情。那么我们借助信息化时代，让汉字教学进入数字化时代，进入信息化时代的高速公路， 我觉得这是汉字教学的突破，也是整个中文教学难得的发展机会。不同地区几乎同时出版了关于汉字教学信息化的研究成果，这个是对于国际中文教育界来说是学科建设的一个重大突破。我在远离中国大陆的情况下，我不能不批评一下，或者说激励一下中国大陆众多的同行，应该睁开眼睛看世界，向国外先进的同行。我认为在这些方面，这2本书是先进的、有价值的，必定会写入国际中文教育的历史。我相信。我说别的话不很重要，但这句话很重要。我对我的预测非常有自信。我最后再谈2点看法。信息化时代或者数字化时代的汉字教学，绝不仅仅是由笔写改为电写这样一个简单的或者说一个重要的转变。我刚才说了，会带来很多汉字研究新的领域、新的课题、新的理论和实践的问题。比如说，电写时代要不要再写汉字？写汉字的目的、意义是什么？这是一个我认为，在这个汉字教学数字化时代或者信息化时代一个很重要的前提。要不要再写？可能有2种观点，一种是不要再写了，学习者就是不愿意写，所以能不写就不写。我个人的看法呢是，如果你的学生愿意，你也可以这样做。从学理上说，我认为还是要写一写，甚至我认为，恰恰是因为电写时代，我们要通过拼音输入来提取和选择汉字，那么要讲汉字的字理、字义、结构规则，甚至汉字的造字法，讲的目的是便于他们对汉字有一个清醒的认识，甚至讲一下用学习者的母语或者媒介语讲一下汉字的演变历程都是必要的，因为这是不仅是汉字文化的体现，也是更好的进行电写的需要。输入了汉字，提取汉字，那么那些汉字都是同音近音的字和词，如何选取就需要有汉字的音符叫声符和形符的知识。有了这样的些知识，对于他们选取汉字是有意义的。另外，从学理上说，无论是长期还是短期，如有可能，了解一下汉字演变的历史当然这不一定花很多时间来讲这个汉字的结构规则，它的特点和特征也是非常有必要的我的俗话是学一回汉语，对汉字不了解，或者了解的不多，这个是于情于理不合适的。所以我觉得在信息化时代要教要写，但是教到什么程度，写到什么程度，要求如何，我觉得这个值得探讨。那是不是还像过去的一笔一划要求这个书写规范，写的要漂亮，不漂亮再重写？我个人认为在这些方面要打折扣。我们教师在教的时候，在演示的时候要高标准，要规范化。学习者学的时候要尽量这样做，但是做不到的话，我在笔写时代都要求放宽因为这是不容易的，慢慢就好了。到了信息化时代，其实我早就提倡打字，打字以后就不存在这些问题了，我们不必追究了。我甚至批评一些人自己电写，要求学习者必须是手写作业和作文，这个是跟有些人做法一样，这是双标，这个不好，做人不厚道。我自己要求不高，所以我做的不好，对学习者要求不高。比方说，就是刚刚不久，我教的是高级班，这个中国经典小说研读，那个考试卷子有这样一道题，说《城南旧事》一个著名小说，那里有一句话叫“英子仰起头”，然后我让学生回答“仰起头”什么意思？学生回答“抬起头”，但是他们写的汉字那个“抬”落了提手，我仍然给对，这个3分给了。 一个青年老师检查我的卷子，说：“李老师，这个你应该扣分儿。”我说：“为什么？”他说：“那个台落了一个提手。”我说：“我当然知道了。”他说：“那写错了，写的不对，你为什么不给扣分儿？”我说：“你应该知道，仰起头。”他回答：“抬起头，对不对？”他说：“对。”我说：“他懂没懂？”懂了。我说：“不就差一个提手吗？”用我们东北老家的话，这是多大点事儿？落就落了吗？我自己还写错别字呢，为什么一见到这个这么兴奋啊？你兴兴奋奋的来指责我说你疏漏了。我说我多少年考这个题都是落了提手，照样给分儿。我的理据是他读懂了，就是差了一个提手，这个不是多大的事儿啊。他写成抬起头那几个字他会认识的。我觉得我在电写时代手写时代对他们就当下吧说起来要求都不高，这不是我放低标准，而是我认为他们懂了啊。如果打字的话，他也应该选那个，即便是选错了，我知道他要选那个台，把那个提手落了，选了另一个台，我也给分。当然，我在要求学生的时候，我总是心太软，心太软。他们写汉字，我自己宽容，因为我也常常提笔忘字，这是没办法的事儿。信息化时代，全都换笔了，我不能再讲了。我有很多话想倾诉。这个发布会，我更重要的是祝贺，而且我从国际中文教育来看至少我知道2本新书将会触动国际中文教育汉字教学的转型，这是我们学科建设的重大好事儿。我再次祝贺这个叫我们的书名叫什么？
数字时代的
数字时代
汉字教学。
汉字教学。你看，我不但记不住人名，我的书名也忘了，抱歉。但是跟我记人名一样，书的内容我已经记住了。谢谢大家听我不是很这个专业的讲话，但是我的心情是十分专业的，向你们致敬。
谢谢李全教授。
非常感谢. Thank you so much for your kind words and inspiring talk. It's always wonderful to hear from you, and thank you again for joining us after such a busy day. I will now begin to get to the meaty part of what our book is about. So I thought it'd be first useful to talk about where we began. So this project really began back in 2021 when we received funding from the UCD Office of Global Engagement, the Global Engagement Seed Fund, and DCU School of Applied Language and Intercultural Studies on behalf of the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Ireland. So this project was really to investigate and explore the present and future of teaching Chinese characters online. Really, we wanted to see the situation of COVID, how that changed the teaching of Chinese characters online. So the project as a whole encompassed 3 perspectives: teaching methods, learning strategies, and curriculum design. So some of the data that we gathered from this project is actually in 2 of our chapters in our book, and you'll hear about those a little later on, chapter 3 and chapter 5. So this seminar series that some of you also attended, and again, we thank you for joining us. This was held in autumn 2022, and we looked at the lessons learned really from COVID-19. The topics ranged, a history of teaching characters in Europe, student and teacher perspectives, teaching resources, literacy skills, typing, and so on. This seminar series over the 10 weeks actually attracted an audience of over 400 researchers, practitioners, and students. So from this, we were compelled to compile this edited book and invited some of our authors to contribute to the knowledge sharing in the field. So here is our book cover that you can keep an eye out for as well. So our book is really broken down into 3 distinct themes with 9 chapters. So the first theme is teaching and learning Chinese characters online. And this really focuses on, the global catalyst of COVID-19. The key findings from these chapters indicate while technology is not expected to replace teachers, it is envisioned that this will become a key skill for the future. But despite potential opportunities coming to light, students still report that online experience is incomparable to face-to-face teaching for them. So theme 1 takes a closer look at this topic, firstly through a deep dive into the student perspective in chapter 3, and then the main issues emerging when it comes to the handling of Chinese character instruction over 3 years from 2020 to 2023 in chapter 2. Theme 2 then is the critical perspectives regarding typing Chinese characters in the CFL classroom. So really adding this kind of, again, this catalyst of COVID-19 into the mix saw that a mass migration of courses took place in the online space. So research really needs to be teased out in this area so that instructors can make informed choices when it comes to introducing typing to their classroom. So through chapters 4 and 5, it is intended that practitioners can be empowered to make informed choices, while researchers can identify scope for future studies so that more can be understood between this relationship of handwriting and typing, and indeed the affordances and implications of typing in the CFL classroom. Theme 3 then looks at the development of methodologies and theories for character teaching. So through detailing the theories of various approaches, the chapters within this section empower the reader to consider what the priorities are for a CFL curriculum according to their own situation, rather than following the status quo of the latest trend. The last part of the book is a reflective narrative by Professor Bob Adamson, who unfortunately is not online today, but he kindly sent us a video, so we will hear from him later on in this presentation. So the book, of course, in the title, we are looking to the future. So the recommendations listed throughout the chapters, they serve as a starting point for redeveloping curricula and redesigning the classroom setup to support and enhance student learning in the digital era. So the experts in the book call for further research and documentation of such in order to advance new concepts and the suggestions that are made. Student and practitioner voices, as well as the practical application of redeveloped curricula, are crucial in advancing the field and supporting CFL students appropriately in the digital age. Really under 2 themes, we have curriculum design and technology. Chapter 6, we will hear from a bit later, calls for an approach to introducing characters that does not necessarily rely on popular textbooks. So asking again practitioners to carefully consider what characters are taught and when. Chapter 8 comments on the factors that influence this decision making and encourage communication between researcher and practitioner. Chapters 4 and 5 in theme 2 are also particularly relevant to this redesign as they address the approach to typing in the CFL classroom. Chapter 5 will highlight the benefits and affordances of typing, and Chapter 4 also describes how handwriting and typing can exist in harmony in the CFL classroom. Again, more research to document experiences is certainly needed. From the technology perspective, in Chapter 3, there are features of a proposed application that are suggested based on the student experience of learning Chinese online. Chapter 6 is sources described with the aim of supporting initial literacy development. Chapter 7 then describes an application that is already published online, and we get to see how that allows students to delve into the etymology of characters to advance their orthographic awareness. Of course, again, communication comes to the fore here. Practitioners, technologists, researchers should communicate with each other in order to decipher the needs of CFL learners, to look at the practicality of any proposed applications, and indeed the possibility of developing such. So further research with these 3 voices could begin to address the gap in this area and move closer to tangible outcomes, specifically designed for the CFL classroom in the current digital age. So the testing of such should also include the student and voice in order to enhance their experience. finally, the intentions of this edited book. Specifically, it contributes to a number of practical recommendations that aim to inspire researchers and practitioners. It provides an overview of the emergency remote teaching (ERT) situation and information on the CFL learners' trajectory that allow us to take stock of research so far and notice future research opportunity gaps that need to be addressed. For example, it's imperative that a CFL learner's processing of characters is explored and understood to fine-tune styles and approaches. The use of technology in the classroom to enhance teaching and learning and to aid student retention is also strongly advocated. There's a clear need for online resources to be developed to support student learning in the digital age. So in terms of the learning process, applications supporting orthographic awareness, student-teacher communication, and opportunities to handwrite are suggested. Meanwhile, advanced assessment features that could diminish instances of academic dishonesty are also encouraged. Incorporating technology as an approach to teaching Chinese characters, such as typing and the e-writing approach, is another way to ensure that future courses are well prepared for the digital future. So this book is a vital resource that will enable instructors and researchers to take stock of current practices and explore cutting-edge research, thereby helping to support their own students in the CFL classroom. And our main goal really is it's further intended that more empirical studies will stem from the themes highlighted in this book, including regions other than the countries reported on, thus always advancing research in the field. This is our book in a nutshell, and I'm delighted to be joined by so many of our authors. It's the first time we're all in a virtual room together, so it's wonderful to see you all. I'm going to now go chapter by chapter, and you'll be able to hear from the authors themselves. So I'm going to begin with under theme 1, Teaching and Learning Chinese Characters Online, chapter 2, and Dr. Linda Lay is going to give us a brief overview of what her chapter with Dr. Danping Wang is about. So over to you, Linda.
谢谢. Is it possible for me to share my PowerPoint, or we will just talk with this as a background?
If it's okay, we can leave this up. I don't want to mess with the webinar. Is that okay?
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
好，那我今天的presentation 主要是以中文进行。我的文章的题目叫做在疫情期间远程线上教学的汉字教学一个回顾研究。我的研究是收录了从2020年1月到2023年5月的20篇文章，这些文章从4大研究数据库里面选出来，然后运用了2个关键词，有汉字和紧急远程教学或者 COVID 或者 pandemic 作为关键词搜索，然后根据4大标准选出了这20篇文章。通过一些简单的描述性分析，我们发现在疫情初期的时候，早在2020年就有一个特刊是由王丹平老师和赵阳老师一起为国际汉语教学学报撰写的一个一共有6篇文章的特刊，其中4篇就涉及到了汉字教学，足以见得疫情对汉字教学的冲击。2022年的时候，更多期刊和书本章节开始讨论疫情期间的汉字教学，而这些研究大部分都集中在大学，研究地区也比较均匀地分布在5大洲。其他的关于研究对象、研究设计、研究工具等描述性分析的话，详情可以在我们章节里找到，这里就不加赘述。现在开始进入正题，通过我们的主题分析 thematic analysis， 我们总结了6个主题。第一个主题是 navigating digital solutions， 探索应用电子资源。探索应用电子资源和第2个主题adjusting assessment 调整评估方法都属于和课程设置有关。有很多文章提到了手机应用、软件等电子学习资源在增强学生参与度和自主学习方面很重要，但是这也引发了老师们关于手写练习减少和及时反馈不足的担忧。 在评估方法方面，电写甚至语音输入已经被很多老师们选择作为写作评估的首选方法。在手写拍照等传统作业的基础上，老师们开始增加电写评估，或者通过视频制作等多模态方式评估学生学习成果。从教师的角度，我们发现有2个主题，一个是 teachers attitude 教师的态度，另一个是 teachers acceptance of technology 教师对技术的接受度。其实教师对技术的接受度也属于教师态度的一个重要方面，但是在疫情期间，这一点尤其突出，所以我们单独列出来了作为一个主题。在这2方面，我们发现汉语教师表现出了强大的适应能力，能够很快接纳和适应新环境下的汉字教学，但同时也会对工作量和身心健康表示担忧。教师对技术的接受度是属于态度的一部分。那教师他们的对技术的接受度包括对电子资源在汉字教学的实用性看法和对科技的信心度，这是基于许瑜老师的文章。由于网络环境、教学效果、教学工具的限制，老师们在进行手写教学和评估学生学习成果时，有时缺乏信心，并且期望能在汉字线上教学方面能受到更多的专业培训和教学支持。从学生的方面，我们的一个大的主题是学生的反馈。我们很高兴地看到，大部分学生对线上汉字教学的态度都是积极且满意的。一些从线上转线下或者线下转线上的学生，虽然更偏向于线下面对面教学，但他们也认为线上教学是一个很好的补充教学手段。但我们要注意的是，很多学生认为，即便是在线上汉字教学的时候，重复的手写练习对于他们提高汉字书写和阅读能力很重要，并且有效。最后，我们的一个大的主题是拥抱新常态，并适应新常态。我们越来越多的老师们和研究者们开始倡导拥抱新常态，他们对未来汉语教学保持乐观的态度，并相信疫情期间的研究、疫情期间的经验为未来在汉字教学中的创新奠定了强大的基础。本回顾研究通过分析20篇文章，展示了教师和学生在线汉字教学中所面临的挑战和解决方法。我们发现，尽管手写仍然重要，课程应调整以重新思考数字时代汉字学习的目标。在响应数字时代的趋势下，我们预期将有以电写为主要教学方法转变的倾向。通过疫情期间积累的使用电子学习教学资源的经验，激励了教学方法和课程设计的创新，将技术辅助教学整合到课程中，能有助于提高入学率、就学保留率和学生参与度。这就是我们本章节的主要内容，谢谢大家。
Thank you so much, Linda, for that wonderful introduction. I'll move swiftly on. Again, if there's any questions, please add them to the Q&A box that is currently open. So moving on to chapter 3, which is my chapter. This is about investigating the student perspective on the future and on the present and future of teaching Chinese characters online. So this is the first set of data that we gathered from that project I described that began in 2021. So this was a worldwide survey in English-speaking countries of the student perspective of teaching and learning Chinese characters online. So while advances in online learning tools meant that students could still virtually attend classes after the COVID-19 pandemic came to a head in early 2020, CFL students are faced with specific challenges in this move to at-distance learning, namely in acquiring Chinese characters. Due to the vast number of characters, the widely reported difficulty in learning them, students generally have spent much time focusing on the written aspect, which they deem necessary for both reading and writing skills of Chinese. So apart from missing this instructor's real-time guidance and feedback on handwriting practice, typing somewhat replaced handwriting in the classroom during this time. This actually came with mixed reviews from students, we found. So this chapter examines the present and future of teaching Chinese characters online from the student perspective, with data collected in the form of questionnaires and some follow-up interviews from English-speaking countries worldwide. It consolidates the student feedback and provides practical suggestions for online CFL curricula. So students noted that online learning might be better suited to skills of reading, listening, typing as it stands. But even with that, the existing learning materials need major updates so that they can be accessed online and so mirror the current hybrid learning environment. In terms of learning strategies adopted, students note that their independent learning strategies were not majorly affected in the online space. However, more structured work in and outside of the virtual classroom is necessary for handwriting development, according to them. In terms of assessment, students report that their experiences were quite mixed with regards to online versus offline, open book versus closed book, typing, handwriting. However, there could be serious implications to prolonged varied assessment methods among different regions. In terms of character learning, the data demonstrates the crucial and pressing matter that this aspect should be systematically supported through the development of a new or existing online application. So the next step for this research would be to firstly examine how existing applications and software can support the student recommendations. In this way, a more structured curriculum and even effective assessment mode could be explored while utilising current resources. Further steps could then be to collaborate with a software developer to develop an application or platform to holistically host the features mentioned. Of course, specific research into defining these potential features should first be completed and empirical data before a prototype is developed. I will move on then to theme 2, which is the critical perspectives regarding typing Chinese characters in the CFL classroom. You'll hear from me again because for Mr. Matt Coss, it's about 3 a.m. where he is now. So we did not make him get up out of bed for this book launch. So I'm happy to do it on his behalf. So Mr. Matt Coss has written a chapter, The E-Writing Approach to L2 Chinese Pedagogy, Educational Imperative and Empirical Evidence. So Mr. Matt Coss says, in the digital age where mobile technologies are becoming ubiquitous and mediate communication locally and globally, it is necessary for L2 Chinese instruction to equip learners with the language skills needed to communicate in an ecologically valid and practical way. For example, by maximizing the connections between pedagogical tasks and real-world communication. So in this chapter, he argues that shifting from current handwriting-focused pedagogical approaches to the e-writing approach, in which literacy and digital composition skills across multiple genres are developed in tandem with oral communication skills, and is critical for L2 Chinese pedagogy programs coming into the 21st century. To substantiate this educational imperative, Matt Coss reviews the growing body of empirical evidence from L2 research, with a particular focus on Chinese as a foreign language. The rapidly developing research agenda on e-writing for L2 Chinese spans diverse areas of inquiry, including vocabulary acquisition, interaction and feedback, writing assessment, emerging technologies, teacher and learner perceptions, and program and curriculum design. So following that overview of recent research developments, he outlines potential action points for language teachers, programs, and other relevant stakeholders for gradually but purposefully adopting the e-writing approach. So as our field explores the viability of e-writing in our own context, which he truly believes is an educational imperative for learners in the 21st century, Matt says that we must do so in a justifiable way, where we document the successes, the challenges, the impacts on students, and the questions that continue to emerge, of which for now, he mentions there are likely to be many. By documenting our processes and reporting them in settings like conferences, social media groups, and practitioner and scholarly publication avenues, we can contribute to a collective confidence that our efforts are resulting in meaningful educational change while avoiding attempting to innovate without understanding other similar context experience. So this is Matt's chapter, and thank you, Matt, for your contribution. And I will now pass to our next speaker, so to Dr. Zhang from Dublin City University.
Hello, everyone. So the context of my chapter is set during the COVID-19 pandemic, when a shift to online learning, which significantly increased the use of typing and marginalized handwriting in the learning environments. And we all know that Chinese characters have a complex orthographic structure requiring labor-intensive handwriting, which is challenging for beginners in Chinese as a foreign language, as Professor Li Quan mentioned in his introduction. So the chapter I wrote explores how embodied cognition is engaged in handwriting and typing during the learning process of Chinese characters. Embodied cognition suggests that the mind is not only connected to the body, but that the body influences the mind. Cognitive processes are grounded in the sensory and motor systems of the body. In the context of learning Chinese characters, embodied cognition involves in the physical actions of writing and typing, which engage different sensory and motor pathways. In terms of handwriting, it can enhance memory and recognition because it involves motor memory and spatial configuration, where learners physically form the characters with their hands. In terms of typing, it also engages embodied cognition through multimodal processes, including visual and auditory encoding, shifting between visual symbols, pinyin, and phonetic sounds. So the chapter reports survey data collected from 38 beginner learners and 20 CFL teachers across 6 English-speaking countries. The survey investigated the use and perception of handwriting and typing in character acquisition. The results show that handwriting is perceived as more beneficial for character recognition and graphic-forming mapping. Typing, on the other hand, although essential in the digital era, is undervalued for its potential in character learning. The teachers and learners show awareness of the multimodal resources offered by virtual spaces, but tend to overlook the embodied cognition potential of typing. We usually say that our students nowadays belong to the Generation Z, who are digital natives. So despite their familiarity with typing, they still recognize the advantages of handwriting for character learning and personal enjoyment. And of course, there are some limitations of the study, and the chapter also recognizes that for future research, we probably need to increase the sample size and use statistical analysis in future to enhance the generalizability of the findings. However, the chapter also emphasizes the need to raise awareness of the potential benefits of embodied cognition in typing to improve Chinese character learning in virtual environments. Last but not least, I did use ChatGPT. So whatever you have heard so far are all summarized by ChatGPT. So what I did is just to go back to make sure that ChatGPT didn't make any mistake. I used to say that typing is unstoppable and irreversible. Now I think it's the time for us to think about the digitalization of Chinese language education as a whole. It's not just typing or handwriting, which is happening already, like Professor Li Quan said. If we actually manage to make a small step forward for the Chinese character pedagogies, we probably have a really good breakthrough for the digitalization of Chinese language education. I would like to invite researchers who are interested in this topic to get in touch with us so that we can start collaborating on this very important research idea. And thank you.
Thank you so much, T, for that that introduction to your chapter. And indeed, we would love to continue this conversation. This is the purpose of the book as well. So thank you so much for highlighting that. Moving on to the final theme, and Mr. Andrew Scrimgeour is joining us from New Zealand this time, and he's going to introduce his chapter to us. Take it away, Andrew.
Well, after hearing from Zhang, of course, I really wish I'd put this through ChatGPT beforehand, and it would have made the task an awful lot easier. But I don't know whether I would have agreed with it, I must say, because I do find that many of the things that I have to say about character teaching and learning are often contradicted, if you like, by some of the assumptions that one sees in much of the literature in relation to this. And my environment of teaching and learning and research is school-based learners, children from the age of reception or the beginning of primary school and early secondary school in particular. They often have very low time on task in their Chinese language programs. They have what we describe as low incentive to learn because they haven't yet fully committed to this particularly challenging task. And there's often low engagement because the resource base that we have for teaching in primary and secondary schools is both limited and based upon some really awful assumptions that are drawn from even the what's it called, Hanyu Keban, produced by Beijing Daxue, back in the 1950s. We see that there's been so much top-down influence on school-based learning of Chinese by the resources that were once developed and prepared for in-country learners of a mature and adult age with strong motivation. So we have very few resources that provide insights into the nature of the Chinese language writing system for learners in both primary and secondary schooling, for learners who need an adequate introduction, what we refer to as initial literacy development in Chinese, some basic introductory experiences that give them an insight into what the challenge is that they now face. The textbooks that we've got have typically a very fractious and positivistic view of Chinese characters. You get a little bit of pictographs, you get a little bit of semantic compounds and phonetic compounds, but then all the textbooks fall back into stroke repetition, stroke pattern writing of characters in the most mundane of fashion, with children who really deserve a great deal more than that, and whose intellect is completely uninspired by that sort of imposition. And, it begs the question whether we're really understanding and appreciating the Chinese writing system from the learner's perspective, or whether we are imposing upon them a set of assumptions and long-held beliefs that go back over 2,000 years to Xu Shen and others that really aren't appropriate in the context in which children are likely to encounter characters in a random and piecemeal fashion over a long but very low-intensive, learning experience. So that's what my chapter is about, really, is how can we reframe the Chinese writing system from the school-based learner's perspective so that their introduction to that system is insightful and practical and useful. And I have no argument with all of the talks we've heard about e-writing and the e-writing imperative, as we heard, and the words of Li Quan at the beginning. But I'll come at it from the same perspective of him, from the heart. What teachers in primary and secondary school require is a resource base that stimulates intellectual inquiry in their classrooms. And what we have found, and as I think as Linda Lay would say in Melbourne last weekend, teachers are really, really keen for a better set of data that they can work with, because their L1 home language in China experience of Chinese writing, of the Chinese writing system, does not adequately prepare them to navigate that territory with young non-Chinese background children. And we've got an awful long way to go before we can really say that we're doing the right sorts of things with kids in schools, where ultimately, at the moment, we know retention is an issue and perceptions are negative. And this is one of the starting points that we really have to work with. So thank you. And I really appreciate everything I've heard today. And your introduction, Caitriona, of course, was very fulsome. And I assume that is the introduction to the book. It was a very, very comprehensive and detailed and appropriate analysis of the chapters. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And that's right. I didn't give it all away, so you'll have to read the
I'm looking forward to my copy.
Not at all, not at all. Thank you so much for that. Moving swiftly on to our chapter 7, Professor Yishu is joining us from China, actually, but she is based in the University of Pittsburgh. So over to you, Xu Laoshe.
Thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So I'm going to introduce my chapter in English, but I was very glad to find that some of the things that I'm going to talk about actually correspond to what Professor Li Quan was saying regarding 字理, 字的结构, and also things related to 部首 and the 部件. So in my chapter, I actually talked about 3 different studies, but they are all related to some key concepts that are, those key concepts are visual skills, orthographic awareness, and chunking. And chunking, by chunking, I mean ways of decomposing characters into 部件. So in the first study that I reported, and it was actually a study done a few years back with me and some collaborators, it reported that beginner level Chinese foreign language learners' visual skills, that is, their skills to differentiate picture patterns or simple patterns that should be differentiated from each other, and their skills to tell whether a Chinese character has the correct structure or not. It is those kind of skills are correlated with their Chinese learning success. And actually, those kind of skills were not, those kind of correlation were not found among intermediate level Chinese learners. So it's one of the first, I think, correlation studies, and maybe it's the only one correlation studies between the visual skill and the Chinese learning ability among the Chinese L2 learners. And I myself find the results pretty interesting. The second study that I shared in the chapter is a survey study. It was a survey of both the students and the teachers' opinions on visual chunking, basically the strategy that one might use to decompose a character into smaller components, not just into 部首, but also into 部件. I consider that to be important because while we do put a lot of emphasis on semantic and phonetic radicals, and that's very important, I also consider that chunks also to be an important part in Chinese character learning. And in the survey, we found that students' opinions and the teachers' opinion could differ quite much on how important chunking could be. And teachers had a more divergent view, different views among themselves about whether chunking is important and how it could be implemented in character teaching. And the third part of the chapter, I shared the results from a small perceptual decomposition study in which I asked the students or participants who have learned Chinese for a little more than a semester to decompose complex Chinese characters into smaller chunks. And those are based on their structures. We know Chinese characters can have several different structures, 12 basic structures, left, right, up, down, left, middle, right, and half enclosed or fully enclosed, those kind of structures. And what I found is that those beginner level learners, students who have learned Chinese for a little more than a semester, actually can decompose characters pretty successfully, achieving about 90% accuracy. And their performance, not too surprisingly, was correlated with the character's visual complexity, meaning that the more strokes a character has, generally speaking, the students would have a more difficult time decomposing the Chinese characters. It also seemed to be that they are having more difficulty with an up-down structure instead of a horizontally oriented character. And I had this tentative suggestion that it could have something to do with the fact, their first language English, or generally speaking, those Indo-European languages are more they're horizontally oriented. So based on these 3 studies, although there were 3 different studies, I think there's some coherence among them. So I'm trying to argue that the ability to see characters as a reasonable composition of different things, developing visual orthographic skill is very important in Chinese character learning, perhaps especially so in this era when we are trying to find ways to replace part of the handwriting requirement, while we are arguing for a typing strategy or different ways of integrating maybe digital resources in our Chinese language teaching. Perhaps we could direct our attention to helping students develop those abilities to see characters as the scientific composition of different smaller components, not just compositions of random strokes, but compositions of something that makes sense to them. So this is what my chapter is about. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Shulasha, for joining us and for giving us that rundown, and for providing so much data in your chapter as well. It's fascinating to read. I'm sure our readers will look forward to it. Finally, for hearing from our guest authors that have joined us today, I will now pass to chapter 8 before we hear the video from Professor Bob Adamson. So I will pass to Dr. Xi Fan, I believe, who is going to speak a little bit about chapter 8.
Hello, everyone. I'm Fancy. I'm a lecturer. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Fancy. I'm a lecturer in the psychology department in Guangzhou Medical University. Before I introduce my chapter, I would like to express my gratitude to the book's editor for giving me the opportunity to contribute my research. I also want to thank my co-author, Professor Reilly from Maynooth University, for his support and collaboration. Our chapter focuses on psycholinguistic research related to Chinese character recognition and its implications for teaching Chinese as a foreign language. We review a range of psycholinguistic studies, highlighting both similarities and differences in how native speakers and CFL learners recognize Chinese character. Our goal is to offer theoretical insights and practical teaching strategies for CFL educators. For example, this research indicates that stroke count and radical counts and radical positions reliably affect how native speakers recognize character. CFL learners, on the other hand, are also influenced by their learning stage and the specific tasks they are engaged in. Both groups exhibit a word superiority effect, yet CFL learners tend to rely more on lexical information, especially for low-frequency characters. So this highlights the need for tailored teaching methods in CFL education, such as focusing on stroke orders in the early stage and emphasizing the importance of radical, etc. And we have summarized all these research results and teaching implications in a table for the convenience of our readers. So in short, our chapter highlights how important psycholinguistic insights are for improving CFL teaching strategies. By using these findings, teachers can better help CFL learners overcome the challenges of learning Chinese characters. Additionally, our review point out the need for future research to look at cross-cultural and conduct long-term studies to see if these results can apply broadly. And it's also important to track the progress of CFL learners, especially as their strategies and processing methods begin to align more closely with those of native speakers. And that's all about our chapter. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Fancy. And Ronan is also joining us, Professor Ronan Reilly. So thank you for joining us as well. I've noticed the time, and I am going to move quickly on to Professor Bob Adamson's video that he kindly sent us. So Professor Bob Adamson wrote the reflective narrative, the final chapter of the book, and he couldn't make it to today's book launch, but he has provided a video for us. So I'm going to play that now, and my panelists might give me a thumbs up to make sure that the audio is okay.
Hello, everyone. My name's Bob Adamson, and I wrote the final chapter for this book. And I'd just like to briefly provide an overview of some of the ideas that I present in this last chapter. Basically, it's an afterword, which is a personal reflection on my reading of all the chapters in the book. And I'm trying to provide my views on how I would integrate the ideas that I gleaned from the book into my own personal pedagogy, and also to attempt to provide an overview as to how all the different ideas that arise in the chapters can be conceptualized into an overall framework of how we can learn Chinese characters. Now, I start by presenting a little bit of personal history. I'm not a teacher of Chinese. I'm a learner, and a rather poor learner of Chinese at that. I have never studied Chinese formally, but I did live in China, and I've been visiting China for over 40 years now. I've made some attempts to learn Chinese characters without a great deal of success, and I can claim that maybe I can recognize several hundred characters, but the number of characters I can actually write can be counted on the fingers of one hand, basically. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'm not a proficient writer of Chinese characters. I did learn some characters through a variety of methods. These include using the character cards you can find, dictionary surfing, learning the stories behind characters, and also just purely by recognizing characters from context, by learning about radicals and identifying ideograms, pictograms, and so on. So I can decipher characters to some extent, but in a very limited way. So I feel a little bit of a fraud, if you like, in being the author of the final chapter of the book, but I think it's important to have a learner perspective. And the crucial idea that I have is that learning is the only measure of success in teaching.
That's a dramatic pause.
Caitriona? It could be the internet connection at Caitriona's point.
Yeah, she seems frozen as well. That's right.
Yeah.
So, Kate, we can't hear you at all. Or Bob.
As Caitriona. Hello, you're back, Caitriona.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Let me go back.
I think it was the British election. Okay. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. Apologies.
Learner of Chinese characters. Well, I learned that the difficulty lies in various ways. First of all, actually understanding Chinese characters. There are very few phonetic clues, obviously. And then this leads on to the question of recognition and remembering characters over time, sustained learning. And then, of course, the whole business of reproducing characters in writing, moving from the receptive skills of reading and moving on to the productive skills of writing. And these are all very complicated from the point of view of someone who was brought up learning a phonetically based language with an alphabet. So I think the book makes clear that all these different stages, understanding, recognizing, remembering, and reproducing characters, are very complex, very difficult to carry out. And the book suggests various techniques that can be used for different aspects of these. And the suggestions are drawn from a range of language learning perspectives, cognitive perspectives, emotional perspectives, and so on. And the challenge I found was, how can I fit this into my overall view of learning, which is, of course, ideologically based. It's based on my own perceptions of what teaching and learning involves. The other point that I would make is that the chapters highlight the different purposes that learners have, and this also needs to be taken into consideration when we are designing our own approach to learning and teaching. Some learners absolutely need Chinese characters, whether this is for the requirements of an examination or for a particular career or even for their particular learning interests. Others, like myself, don't need Chinese characters quite so comprehensively. They are useful. They're useful for traveling around China, for reading instructions, for understanding directions, for reading some documents about Chinese education, in my case, which is an area of research interest. But I don't need that thorough knowledge of Chinese characters, because my requirements are more for oral Chinese, for getting around China, for daily interactions, and so on. So these different purposes need to be borne in mind when we are creating our own pedagogy. And we have to take into account the particular needs, interests, and abilities of the students. So what do our pedagogical decisions depend on? As I just said, learner purposes are very important for us to consider, and also learner needs, abilities, and preferences for learning styles. And the idea I've come up with in concluding the chapter is the need for a form of principled pragmatism. Now, principled pragmatism, to take the pragmatism part first of all, this means that we can choose any teaching technique, any teaching methodology or teaching strategies that we like, irrespective of their ideological basis or their conception of teaching and learning process underlying them. And we use them in a situation that we judge requires that particular approach. The principal part is you must have a strong justification, an educational justification for choosing that strategy. Now, these strategies can change over time, over a short period of time or over a long period of time. We might move from, for example, teacher-centered learning to learner-centered learning as students become more mature and more capable and have greater competence in character production. We might also make very short-term changes. We might be in a lesson, for example, where we're teaching, and we notice that the students are not quite ready for moving to a productive task. They might need to go back to a receptive task. And so within a lesson itself, we might shift between these things. So another aspect of my chapter is to produce various continua which are decision-making strategies. They're sliders that we can move from one extreme to another or within certain poles of various learning systems and teaching systems. So overall, I've produced these ideas. As I say, they're based largely on my own reflections. And what I would hope will happen is that readers bear in mind what I'm saying, but they do so in a way that is reflective, that they can reject the things that don't make sense to them, that are not useful to them, and they can select those aspects which do make sense and maybe integrate them into their own frames of thinking about teaching and learning. If we can get the readers to reflect in that way, I think that is a major contribution that this book can make to teaching and learning Chinese characters. So, in conclusion, I'd really like to thank the editors. I'd like to thank Caitriona and Chi and Danny for the wonderful opportunity to participate in this book project. And I wish the book every success. Thank you.
Thank you again to Professor Bob Adamson for providing us with that video. Apologies again for this slight blip, but anyway, we're almost coming to the end of our book launch now. I just want to wrap up by thanking our the endorsers of our book who have so kindly shared their thoughts on it on an earlier before the book has been released, and we're very grateful to them, and I'm going to share them with you now. I think Professor Adamson's talk was so good that now my PowerPoint won't play, so I will just show you from the screen instead. So, oops, it seems to be disappearing.
Can I say, Caitriona, just while you're prepping there, that Bob's contribution at the end of the book, could almost be a foregrounding chapter, a foreword, because of that. It's a reflective piece, but it actually provides a preparatory perspective to take on reading the chapters. And indeed, I will go to his chapter first when I get the book, because I think that will really provide, a really grounded perspective on how to navigate one's way through it, rather than invested sense of self, what do I believe in what's being said. I think that was just a wonderful conclusion, so I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you for leading me into the endorsements of the book. So Professor Helen Shen kindly gave us an endorsement, Professor Li Chuan, who we heard from earlier, and Professor George Zhang. Also, I will let you read them on screen while I just reiterate my thanks to all the participants for coming and joining us today. We ran a little bit over time, but I think it's important to allow space for everybody to give their thoughts and their opinions and to describe their chapters. This will be recorded. It is recorded, so it will be available to look at online afterwards in case some of your colleagues have missed it. No problem. An important date that we are going to note is the 21st of September. It's the date that we believe that this should all be out and ready to go. And we have just heard that we will have a discount code for the book. News just in, so you're hearing it here first. So please, if you would like to avail of this discount code, or if you would like more information, I have my email address here. Please feel free to contact us. Please feel free to contact us with future research ideas that we've mentioned throughout the book launch, and just thank you all for coming. I will pass to Chi to check that there are no questions or comments or anything in the Q&A.
Hi everyone. We got a comment and also I think it's a question from Guan Da 老师 from Germany. I don't know. Could we allow? Yes, I can
Yeah.
allow Andrew to talk. And Andreas, you can just unmute yourself and speak up.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Hello, 郭
Great.
老师.
I'm afraid you cannot see me. I cannot open my camera, but that doesn't matter. Greetings to everyone from Berlin. I'm very happy to join you from here, and I'm looking forward to this fascinating book. And I would love to get more exchange on the international level with all of you. Actually, I just writing in the chat that we did some research in Germany already on similar topics, and I would love to share these with you, but they have been only published in German yet. So I'm looking quite for an opportunity to spread these more outside the German-speaking world. And maybe some of you know that nearly 20 years ago, I did another conference on teaching Chinese characters in Germany, and some of the older colleagues did attend that, and the conference meetings of that were published at Beijing Yuan Daxue Chubanshi. And I just want to put a slight advertisement on this book, which actually is very old, but had also this very interesting interdisciplinary approach from different disciplines. So congratulations to work on this field again, and I would be happy to join in future research. Thank you.
And if I can say, Andreas, that work in 2005, I think, was absolutely seminal and an enormously important foundation for much of what's happened since. So I congratulate you on that, and very pleased to see you here today.
Thank you very much. And I would love to see you soon in the future, maybe also in Europe, because my students and myself read your publications as well.
Lovely. We'll make a date.
Yes.
Could we tag on that if Andrew is in Europe anyway, so we would love to have you to come to Ireland again.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have to save up to go to Ireland. It's very expensive.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for your comment, Andreas. It's wonderful to see that you made it. It's great to see you, and thank you for your support. Thank you so much.
And we haven't got any more questions or comments in the Q&A, but if any of the attendees would like to perhaps raise their hand, we can actually have a discussion a live discussion here. So, well, because we are running out of time, we'll probably just allow for one more question. Or if not, we can finish here. And you have the email of Caitriona here. So if you would like to follow up this book launch with any further comments or any queries, please feel free to be in touch.
Well, I'd like to say, just as my concluding comment, thanks particularly to Caitriona for her very good humour and patience with us all, and the management of this process from the lecture series right through to now. It's always been a pleasure. Always a bit scary getting her emails because you know that you're up for another little piece of work. But the way it's been managed and the outcome is just fantastic. And I think the presentations this evening for me just have been really insightful after that long time ago, presence of people's lectures. It's so great to hear it all reflected again and reinforced in that sort of coherence of a chapter each. So well done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we loved working with all of the authors, and hope that this will be the start of something rather than, the end in the book. It will continue to spark those collaborations. Yeah. I think on that positive note, we might call it to a close. Chi, would you like to add anything? Or Danping, would you like to add anything? All good? That's great.
Chi, if you don't mind, I would just share a few thoughts. Thank you so much, Caitriona, for chairing this. And thank you for everyone for supporting us, especially contributing your chapter to this edited volume. I just wanted to say, the publication of the book is certainly not just the end of a collaboration, So while we were thinking about today's book launch, we actually talk about what we can do in the future. So I do hope, when we convince the more people to believe in, the efficiency, the efficacy, all the advantages of incorporating more digital writing into Chinese language teaching. And this is certainly not the destination of the goal of our research. That's simple. No, that's really just the beginning of our work. Having people, their support in believing in the magic of digital writing is just the beginning of the digital era teaching. So it's a whole lot of renovation, transformation to Chinese language teaching will happen because we have this freedom in our Chinese language teaching practices. So we are currently working on some other projects about digital multimodal composing. So this is really, apart from learning how to read and write, we give the learners the purpose, the identity, the freedom to be themselves. Even when they're learning, it's just at the very beginning, they can still be themselves while participating in the whole journey of Chinese language learning. Nothing has to be delayed. And then, to be able to write a story, a poem, and make a video, put their subtitle, on the video to tell their stories, to be themselves. They don't need to wait until, the advanced level to be able to tell people who they are. So there are a whole bunch of, heaps of opportunities, and there will be a genuine transformation of the curriculum in the future. So apart from having a handwriting, curriculum, I think it's time for a lot of leading scholars in the Chinese language teaching, this community, to think about whether or not we should have a digital writing curriculum. How should we get started? What are the first steps? What are the basic skills? How to train teachers? What are the technologies we can use? So a whole bunch of questions we need to answer. So this is just the beginning to tell people, hey, look, there are possibilities. And second point I wanted to mention, T, if you don't mind, I'll just add one more.
Go ahead. Yeah, of course.
I think this is really, it's a fantastic beginning, but I do hope we don't call this post-handwriting era or post this, post that. And we easily entering this kind of zero-sum mentality. While we talk about the benefits of e-writing, at the same time, we talk about how terrible handwriting learning is, how much time is spent on it. And all of a sudden, everyone's telling the stories, their miserable stories of learning Chinese characters. I think that's unnecessary and that's not healthy. As the program leaders of Chinese, we know students need that part of knowledge, that part of skills. So this is a holistic thinking rather than, we're picking up this and we drop that. That is not the correct way that we hope to head into in the future. So while we need a vision for Chinese character teaching, and just as Li Quan Laoshi said at the very beginning, we are looking for a whole new future. So this is the time we find our vision for our career, for our teaching, for the entire Chinese teaching community, rather than just talking about using technology for typing the characters. That's really, just a small part of it. We're looking at a much bigger picture. So we are not focusing, for this book, we are not focusing just on typing or e-writing. We are more ambitious in a way. So we think this is the digital turn of Chinese character teaching. So just the 2 points I hope to add at the end of the book launch. Thank you, Caitriona. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Danping, for the words. Yeah, this is exactly what we like to follow up after today's book launch. I know Danping has already mentioned that they pioneered some really innovative ideas in New Zealand and probably in collaboration with colleagues in other universities in New Zealand and also Australia, since you are so close to in terms of geography. And we are also planning to do something like that here in Ireland. And also, since Andres is here today, please do get in touch if that would be something of interest to you. So in Europe, we can also start any kind of mini steps or small steps in terms of digital transformation of Chinese language education, which is urgently needed. So thanks again for the kind of concluding remarks from Danny, and I really hope this would be a beginning of a new research journey for all of us.
Absolutely. And with that positive note and looking to the future, I'll call this book launch to a close. Thank you so much to the attendees, to the authors, to my co-editors as well, all the publishers at Palgrave Macmillan, the series editors, and to you for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your evening, rest of your night, wherever you're coming from, and hope to see you all again soon. 谢谢大家 and 再见。
谢谢大家，谢谢李璇老师，谢谢大家今天过来，再见。